Welcome back to another edition of Brothers in Cars. I'm Rob Akins, and I'm joined as usual by my brother Fred Akins, a longtime veteran of the auto industry, both from the PR marketing side and also the product planning side. And today I thought it would be kind of fun to talk to Fred about the Jaguar rebranding effort that started about a week ago to got a lot of attention, and we're going to talk about that. We're not going to go down the road of the ad itself and who they're trying to appeal to and so forth. Although, obviously we're going to touch on kind of their legacy and their brand image, but we're going to talk more about Fred's perspective as someone who has launched new vehicles, been involved in kind of repositioning uh, some lines of vehicles within a larger brand perspective. And so, Fred, I'm sure you've seen the ad online,
Yes.
and it's definitely gotten a lot of reaction. And there's a school of thought out there that, well, that's what they were going for. They're trying to generate a lot of buzz, a lot of eyeballs, a lot of clicks, and the old saying that any publicity is good publicity. But at the same time, there's been a real pushback by not just traditional Jaguar owners.
This is how a brand commits suicide. Um, and I'll explain. Yes, there's a school of thought that says any publicity is good publicity as long as they spell your name right. This isn't it, because what you have here is you have a brand with more than 100 years of history. And yes, the brand is well established in the minds of consumers. Jaguar's problem, or excuse me, Jaguar's problem, because that's part of the rebranding, is finally teaching us poor benighted Yanks how to pronounce it properly. It's Jaguar. Um, the problem is that watching the commercial or the teaser ad or whatever they want to call it, the rebranding ad, people watch it over and over again. I'm sure they've gotten tons and tons, and millions of hits on YouTube and other social media. The problem is, so does a plane crash. It gets a lot of eyeballs. It doesn't necessarily engender positive feelings, and even Jaguar Land Rover's director of design, Jerry McGovern, came out and said, I know a lot of people are watching this and thinking that we're on the white stuff, meaning drugs. He said, I can assure you we weren't on the white stuff. Maybe after seeing the response, they should have been, because it would have provided an excuse for why the campaign was as obtuse as it was, and hard to understand, just hard to focus on, because there is no car. On top of that, they're going to stop, at least in the UK, they're going to stop selling cars for a period of a year and a half to maybe 2 years before anybody sees a car. Now, supposedly, the world is going to see the new Jaguar EV sedan tomorrow, but it's not going to debut in London or New York or Paris or any of those other fashion capitals, or Milan. It's going to debut in Miami, which is, it feels a little contrived. I guess there's some sort of art thing,
Right.
but it sounds like they decided to do it in Miami because, number one, in New York and London and all those other capitals, it's December and it's freaking cold and
Mhm.
everyone's all bundled up. in Miami, it's going to be sunny and there's going to be beautiful people and all this other stuff. And there's this art thing. It sounds like they chose Miami not because it's great for the brand or the repositioning of the brand, but because it's where the cool kids hang out,
Right.
especially in December. And I don't know that that's a really good reason to do something like this.
Well,
The other
maybe their thought just thinking or trying to think of what their motivation would be, that there's not going to be any competition from other manufacturers there. It's not like they're at the LA Auto Show or New York
right,
Auto Show or anything like that.
which they could have done, except that the LA Auto Show, I was just there a couple of weeks ago. The LA Auto Show is a shadow of its former self. But that's the case with most auto shows now. The days of multiple major press introductions at any auto show, whether it's LA or Detroit or Chicago or New York, they're gone. The Geneva Auto Show, which used to be one of the big auto shows globally because it was on quote unquote neutral turf, it's dead. It died with the after the pandemic or during the pandemic.
Right.
COVID killed it. And so all of a sudden, the bigger problem I have is, okay, you're coming out with a vehicle that's supposedly going to be about double the price of the vehicles that they used to have. And I can tell you from personal experience, both our sister and my wife both had Jaguars on their shopping list, on their short list for a new vehicle. Now, our sister bought something else, but my wife still had it on the list. But as soon as they announced that they were going to go all EV for the Jaguar brand, completely off the list, gone. Just a non-starter, for our family and her driving patterns.
Right.
So,
well, that's
and
just
it seems like they're walking away from. In fact, they've admitted that they're probably walking away from 90% of their customers. I can tell you again from personal experience with the third generation RX-7 that walking away from 90% of your buyers is a bad strategy. And in fact, it belongs in the bad strategy Hall of Fame or shame.
Yeah. So going back to the whole, okay, we're gonna make a break, clean break from the internal combustion engine, the growler logo, all that kind of stuff. And this they made this decision years ago, right? This is not just something that like 6 months ago they decided let's go all in on EVs. This is the path that we need to take to really set ourselves apart, move into the future with Jaguar. And that was kind of a different time. A lot of automakers had made a big commitment to either drastically increasing their EV offerings or going up, having the plan to go 100% electric or battery electric by 2030, 2035, what have you. And so they're pursuing this strategy, but is not only is their timing a little bit questionable uh, with the brand reimagine, which I hate that phrase, reimagining. But with their decision to say we're pushing all our chips onto green double zero on the roulette table, that
Nice analogy, by the way.
because everybody always says red or black. Like, you got those two guys at the top of the board there that nobody pays attention to until they come up. But pushing their chips on a green double zero and saying the brand is going to live or die with whether or not this one number comes up.
No, you're absolutely right with that. And again, you've General Motors, their CEO Mary Barra had very publicly said that we will be fully electric by I think it was 2035 with our product offerings. And almost immediately, the PR walkback started. Well, that was an aspirational goal. That was because I think their finance department pointed out, Mary, we're making all of our money from full-size pickups and SUVs. And our shareholders, they like profits. They like an increase in shareholder value. And EVs don't give us that. And you had the previous, the current administration in Washington, they were making a push for 50% EVs nationwide by I think it was 2030. California, they were going to completely phase out fossil fuel vehicles by, again, 2035. Here's what happened. A funny thing happened. The consumer didn't get the memo.
Right. And the early adopters, there aren't enough early adopters once they've jumped on board to become a mass market
Exactly.
pool of customers.
And so again, all of these companies exist because, unlike China, it is a free market economy. And consumers get to vote with their wallets and their feet. And, all of a sudden, everybody said, okay, we're going to go, the market's going to go all EV. Ford, GM, of course. And there were a couple laggards. Stellantis, and that was because they were just slow on the uptake when it came to EVs. They were behind the curve because they were basically a perennially struggling brand or collection of brands. And Toyota, which is the largest or one of the largest automakers in the world globally. And they said, well, hold on, we've got all these wonderful hybrids, and our reading of the tea leaves says, no, the market's not ready to go all in on EVs. So we'll build some EVs, but we're going to build a lot more hybrids and plug-in hybrids, and we think that's where the market's going. And the media and the environmental groups excoriated Toyota, and they were demanding Akio Toyota's head on a pike for how dare you not go all in on EVs.
Right. Yeah.
And then the market sentiment shifted, and all of a sudden he looked like a genius. And Stellantis, I just saw their new EV, their new Charger EV, and their Ram Rev truck, and they're really impressive, and the specs are really impressive. But here's the thing: they were able to sort of go to school on what everybody else was doing, and they said, no, we're going to do it a little bit different because we think it's a better way to do it, because the consumer's not ready for full EVs, and more importantly, the infrastructure's not ready for full EVs. And we've talked about that in a previous podcast.
Right. That's something I just watched a video yesterday that was pointing out the fact that over 45, I think it's 46% of current EV owners aren't sure they're going to buy another EV. They think that they are going to seriously consider going back to at least a hybrid vehicle, if not an internal combustion engine vehicle, just because of their frustrations with the limitations of their current EV. Now, we know that technology is improving. There are batteries now that are getting faster and faster for recharge. I think you may have mentioned something that came out of the LA Auto Show. Maybe it was Stellantis, where they estimated you could go from like a 20 to 80 or 10 to 80 charge in under 10 minutes, which now you're talking.
Well, no, that once they come out with the new solid state batteries, and they're probably a couple of years out, but they're closer than they were.
Mhm,
I think Nissan's coming out with some solid state batteries. Now, the question is whether Nissan itself lives long enough to
mhm.
see that come to fruition, or whether somebody buys that part of Nissan to get that technology, and the rest of the company just comes along.
Right.
That remains to be seen. But there's a there's a lot of technological and infrastructure hurdles. You know, here in California, they're talking about, if the incoming administration gets rid of the EV credits, they're gonna double the EV credits. Oh, but by the way, you don't get the credit if you buy a Tesla, because you know
That's another video.
that's another video. Anyhow,
But no, what I'm trying to get at is okay. So, maybe the timing isn't perfect for Jaguar. But beyond that, the old saying that 20% of your customers are responsible for 80% of your profits. It's the
mm-hmm.
same thing, you could say with workers, et cetera. 20% of your workers do 80% of the work. Uh, so is alienating the people who are predisposed to be interested in your vehicles because of their image, their legacy, just how their emotions around the brand. If you decide that you're going to basically tell those people, look, your dinosaurs, we're not interested in appealing to you anymore because you're dying off, or you're not supporting the brand as it is because Jaguar's been losing money per vehicle for years now. But maybe it's an intentional strategy that they're pursuing, that look, we need to completely change the people who are interested in the Jaguar brand, and the people who would be interested in buying our cars. So we know we're going to take a lot of heat for this, but it's going to be worth it because we're going to be able to capture this new energetic image. And I'm sure they're going millennial, Gen Z type people. Now, how many millennials and Gen Zs actually have $125,000 to spend on an EV Jaguar? I think that remains to be seen. But what do you think about this being, yeah, we know we're going to tick people off, but we're going to go that direction because we don't see a future appealing to the 60 something, 70 something traditional Jaguar customer. And so there's a method to our madness. Just trust us. Mhm.
Well, that's and you hit on something there, and that's the part of their strategy that I can sort of understand, because let's face it, Jaguar's customer base was A, dwindling, B, dying off. Um, but again, it all comes back around to product. Jaguar got caught very flat-footed by the shift away from cars, the market shift away from cars to SUVs and crossovers. And so they were on the back foot anyway, having to play catch up. And that's basically most of the last decade with the F Pace, the E Pace, the I Pace EV, which had a fairly well documented propensity to catch fire.
It was kind of older technology, right? It wasn't
Yeah, it
state of the
was.
art.
And then their last Jaguar full size sedan, um, they moved away from their traditional design language, which, if you remember the Jaguar sedans from the 80s, 90s, and beyond, they were really good looking cars. The most recent Jaguar sedan was, aerodynamic, undeniably sleek, but also incredibly forgettable.
Hmm.
And the sales numbers reflected that. Uh, Jaguar, even when they were owned by Ford, their quality got better, and there were a couple of metrics. I think it was JD Power IQS, where Jaguar actually finished in first place in terms of quality, but they weren't able to sustain it long enough for their brand reputation to catch up. And as the market shifted to, oh, our vehicles are going to be smartphones on wheels with lots of electronics, lots of touch screens, lots of capacitive buttons instead of actual physical buttons, they had quality problems with that. But so did the rest of the industry. But Jaguars, as soon as people started saying, "Oh, I have a quality problem with a Jaguar," they were right back off of everybody's shopping list, and their sales reflected that. Their sales were a fraction of what they were, um, right before Ford sold the company to Tata, which is an Indian company, along with Land Rover, and then they created Jaguar Land Rover, which they then abbreviated to JLR. Well, nobody knew what the hell JLR was.
Right.
So again, there's been the inconsistent brand messaging, inconsistent uh, product quality, inconsistent design, um, and eventually the consumer just went, "I've got lots of new choices." And I've got these folks from Hyundai and from Genesis and from Kia, and they're building really nice looking cars. And oh, by the way, I'm looking at their quality scores, and their quality scores are better than Jaguars, and they cost less. A Genesis SUV is every bit as gorgeous as a Jaguar SUV with none of the problems.
Right. And so again, even if we give them the benefit of the doubt that this had to happen, that Jaguar had to go a different direction, find a new customer base, a new image, etc., they really are going to have to use a trite uh, cliche, thread the needle on this one, but it's almost like Apollo 13 trying to come back from the moon and manually get within 1 degree of reentry using a joystick and rockets that were not meant to do that. They have such a tiny sliver of a gap here that they have to execute perfectly in from what I'm seeing to make this work. So their design had better be a home run. Their quality had better be a home run. Their pricing had better be a home run. And they better be able to pull it off for not just the intro, but for several years and not have technical glitches and um, and anything really go wrong with the vehicle, and they better stay in make sure that they're staying in line with consumer wants and desires. And
Exactly.
that's where I'm worried about. We're going to cast aside all our legacy customers, or the vast majority of our legacy customers, totally rebrand. You might as well be introducing a brand new line of vehicles that is not named Jaguar, that is going to be able to hit the ground running and not just sell cars, but be profitable selling cars.
Right. Well, I would hazard to guess that what you just hit on it. It would almost be easier to introduce a completely brand new luxury brand like Hyundai did with Genesis, because they had gotten the quality scores coming up, and I'll go into the quality thing in a little bit. They had gotten the quality scores up to the point where they had credibility with the media and with a number of consumers because of third party validation like JD Power and Consumer Reports, to say, yeah, the quality on these new vehicles is really quite good. So at that point, a new luxury division, a new luxury brand called Genesis, had credibility. On top of that, they had world-class designs because they had some really, really good designers that they had poached from various European manufacturers, and some homegrown talent here in the US. And so they were able to reposition that. Now, the thing with quality is you've got objectively measured quality, and that's one thing. But perceived quality, as far as how the consumer perceives it, there is, by necessity, a 5 to 10 year lag on the quality, the perceived quality. And this is what I ran into when I was at Kia and watching Hyundai and what they were able to do. They basically, we were getting objective quality scores from Consumer Reports and JD Power and everybody that said that our quality was as good or better than Toyota, Honda, etc. Great. But if you looked at the perceived quality scores, we were still well behind them in perceived quality. And it wasn't until we were hitting our marks on the quality side, on the objective quality scores, for 3, 5, even more years before the consumer perceived quality started to go up. And that's just a fact of life. And you can't rush it. It has to be done. It has to be done organically, because especially with quality, people will see the JD Power numbers, but they'll go, wait a minute. If I buy a Hyundai or a Genesis or a Kia, I'm going to have to explain to my, we called it the mother-in-law test. I'm going to have to explain to my mother-in-law why I just spent all this money on a Korean brand or a brand with perceived lesser quality. Then why didn't you just buy? And the same thing with coworkers. Why didn't you just buy a fill in the blank Toyota, Honda, whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And it was only over time, and that you have to sort of, well, best way to describe it is you have to wear people down, and you have to give them reasons. And part of it is you have to get the vehicles out where they can be exposed to it, whether it's a loaner program, whether it's a great warranty, etc., where people go, oh, yeah, I rented one of those for a week on vacation. It was wonderful. It did everything I needed, and it didn't break down.
Right. And I think that's one of the difficulties that is underappreciated. You're not, and people get upset when their iPhone overheats or it, it doesn't deliver on the promises. But Apple is such a strong brand that people will still buy it. Maybe the sales will be slower, but they're not going to walk away from the Apple brand if it's just one or two glitches. It
Right.
would take a lot of things building up. But just the opposite, I think, is going to be true with Jaguar in this case, where, like you said, it's going to be a show me and then show me again. And I don't want to hear bad stories. I don't want to have people don't buy a luxury brand to have other people point and laugh. You know, they they
Look at the Cybertruck.
right. And but people buy it because they want to feel good about it. You don't pay $125,000 for a new vehicle and have to want to worry about, is it going to work? Is it
Well,
going to say what I want it to say about me?
right. And here's the thing that frankly non-car people don't quite understand about the car business. Because buying $125,000 vehicle is not a rational decision. And as a financial advisor, you can tell people, don't buy new, buy a certified pre-owned where somebody else has already taken the depreciation hit.
Right.
But if you buy certified pre-owned, you don't get the internal, people don't get the internal gratification that they get from driving that new vehicle off the lot for the first time, where they know every quirk in the vehicle. And that used to be Jaguar's great strength. You know, as somebody who's been in the industry for 40 years, I'd look at some of these old Jags and go, how did they survive? Because their quality was, by comparison, abysmal. I mean, the old joke, the parts falling off of this Jaguar are of the finest British craftsmanship.
One of my
And people go, well, why didn't you just get a Mercedes or a BMW where everything works all of the time, where you don't have to, the joke about buying a Jaguar was you had to buy a second one so that you'd have one running vehicle while the other one was in the shop.
right.
And we actually knew somebody like that who had multiple Jaguars so that they always had their Jag. And you just go, why do you own it? Oh, look at it. It's gorgeous.
Right.
It's a beautiful car. And the wool carpeting,
The
the
Burlwood.
the burlwood, the aromatic leather seats. You get into one and it smelled like an English drawing room,
Right, but that's
or a club, a gentleman's club, and you just, well, maybe not a gentleman's club, but
but
you
I
get
know
my
what you mean.
drift.
Yeah, but you made a great point that buying, whether it's $100,000 SUV or a $200,000 Porsche or what have you, it is not a logical decision.
No,
If we were looking at pure logic, everybody would drive a Honda CRV or a
or a Toyota Camry.
Toyota Camry. If they had to own a pickup, it would be just a standard Chevy, maybe extended cab, cloth seats, blah, blah, blah. But automobiles, especially for Americans, and I'm sure other parts of the world as well, but especially for Americans,
It's a statement.
it's a statement. It's part of our life. It's not a washing machine or a microwave oven. It is in many ways who we see ourselves as.
Well, it's like one of those motivational posters you used to see, where it has a picture of a beige Camry. And it was basically Camry, because Maytag doesn't make cars.
Right. Yeah. No, but
Yeah.
they better get it right. And I was going to ask you because you spent a lot of time in public relations, and to me, there's a certain amount of crisis management going on here, whether or not they claim, oh, that we knew this was coming, we wanted to make a statement. But when the head of JLR comes out and says, we are totally committed to uh, this new vision, and we don't care if people don't understand. They're going to love it, and they're not getting it. And if we lose our traditional customers, more or less, good riddance. We don't need you. And
Yeah, as somebody who has prepared um, pre-launch executive Q&As, where you try and anticipate every possible 60 minutes type of question that would come from the media, almost to the point of, yes or no, have you stopped beating your wife type of
when did you
question.
stop beating your wife?
When
Right.
did you stop beating your wife? You sort of, and I can tell you, I used to write questions that the executives hated.
Yeah.
I said, okay. I mean, a few times I said, okay, I can delete the question. It doesn't mean that somebody won't ask it. It just means you won't be prepared for it.
Right.
And they get this look on their face like, oh crap, he's right. I better be prepared for it.
But being a CEO, did you ever run into somebody who they just they knew they were right, and they didn't care if anybody else said they were wrong. They were still going to be right, and their ego or their
Yes,
vision.
I've known a number of CEOs who were convinced of their own intellectual superiority right up until the point when they got the pink slip.
Yeah.
One of them even got the pink slip in between the entree and dessert courses at the national dealer meeting. there's a PR level, PR disaster. That's
Yeah.
that's DEFCON 3, because
Wow.
there's no good way to spin that.
No. Okay. Well, but yeah, I wanted to just kind of get your opinion on that because the old saying, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging, and maybe this will work. We don't know yet. We don't know how
Well,
it's
let's put it this way: the next big test will be tomorrow, when
Mhm.
we see whatever they're going to show as far as an actual vehicle. Again, I have a problem with the logic of their campaign, in that they're essentially going to show this car tomorrow, and then they're going to go dark for 18 to 24 months by their own admission.
Mhm.
Well, that means that people, once you show the car, you're going to get a little burst of publicity, but you're doing it at the beginning of December. And basically between Thanksgiving and New Year's, you never wanted to introduce any new vehicle, because there's just too much competition, and people are too distracted. They're thinking about the holidays, they're thinking about Christmas presents. After Christmas, they're thinking, how am I going to pay the bills for all of this crap that I just bought?
Mhm.
The last thing they want to be talking about is a new car or looking for. So, the question is, okay, they're going to get a little blip of publicity when they show a vehicle tomorrow in Miami, and then what?
Yeah.
And it's going to be really fascinating to see how they manage the news cycle for 18 to 24 months before they actually have product in dealerships for customers to go look at and test drive and everything else. Now, I've seen one illustration, a website that a friend of mine owns. He seems to have pretty good intelligence on a lot of these things. And the vehicle looks nothing like a Jaguar, excuse me, Jaguar,
Right.
or a classic Jaguar. It basically looks like the front end has sort of a stepped intake where it looks like, and it's very rectilinear, and it looks like the front of a vacuum cleaner, the head of a vacuum cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that that's a good look, because it doesn't speak to power. It's not super aerodynamic, which is what most EVs are. If you look at Tesla and some of the other EVs, they're very, very aerodynamic because that's how you get better range, is by reducing the aero drag. But this isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in the price range that they're talking for this new Jaguar, you've got alternatives. You've got the higher end Tesla models, the Model S. You've got the Lucid Air and their upcoming SUV, the Lucid Gravity, which I've seen them, they're gorgeous designs. I've driven the Lucid. It is a spectacular design. It is a spectacular vehicle. It also costs somewhere between $100,000 and $170,000. You've got the Porsche Panamera, or excuse me, Taycan. You've got the Taycan, which goes from about $80,000 up to $200,000. So, right there's your competitive set.
Mm-hmm.
Is your new Jaguar, when it comes out in 18 to 24 months, going to be able to compete with those vehicles?
Right. And how are you going to feel driving up to the club or handing whatever the keys are, to the valet?
Well, handing the fob off to the valet in front of Nobu,
Right.
or one of these very high end restaurants, because I don't know how many people are still going to country clubs anymore.
Well, in the Midwest, a few more probably than Southern California, but no, but again, it goes back to the emotions that are attached to what you drive, and
Exactly.
and you don't want to be embarrassed by what you drive. You want to feel good every time you get into it, especially if you're making 12 to $1,500 payments on it.
Yeah, and I don't know that a bunch of androgynous models in brightly colored outfits, um, all looking like recovering heroin addicts, is necessarily the best look for your brand. Now, obviously, the folks in charge of JLR think that it works.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I'll say time will tell.
Time will tell. All right, Fred. Well, thanks a lot for your insights as always. Folks, we'd love to know if you've ever owned a Jaguar, what's your image or what you think of when you think of Jaguar. Are you excited about the launch coming up? Do you think that this is something that you'll be very interested in considering when the vehicles are made available in 18 months plus? Yeah, so just drop us a note, a comment down below, and would love to hear from you. Also, please like and share the video with your friends. It helps us a lot. Subscribe. Uh, Always helps us with the YouTube algorithm. We're just getting started with this channel, and we appreciate all the help we can get. We appreciate you watching if you made it this far, and we'll see you in the next one. Welcome back to Brothers in Cars. I'm Rob Akins. This is my brother Fred Akins, and we're doing a little capper on the original video we did about Jaguar's rebranding. and we did that before the reveal. And honestly, it's been a while since we recorded that, so we are going to get that published. And I still think, because most of what we were talking about had to do with brand image and rebranding and maintaining a legacy for a brand, that that is still fresh enough that it makes sense to have uh, put that video out as is. But we wanted to kind of talk about what Jaguar actually revealed in Miami a few months ago. So as you can see, if you look at the first video, no facial hair. I'm also at the Northern Command in northern Wisconsin here. I have a fireplace in the background. Fred is in his place in Monterey. So Fred, let's just start with what were your thoughts when you saw the reveal of the Jaguar 00 or 00 or whatever they're calling
Well, I like to call it the
it?
because I'm for the life of me, after 40 plus years in the car business, I've never seen a brand do anything like this, which, depending on who you talk to, is either an adventure in dramatic rebranding, or, as some other people have termed it, an adventure in watching a brand commit suicide slowly. If you look at the vehicle itself, I guess it's not unattractive. They had this pink one, and then they also had a very sort of light blue one, which was very Miami Vice, if you think about it. For those of you who are old enough to remember that, the vibe of that TV show. So if you look at this, it's very much sort of brutalist architecture. And depending on your perspective, that can be good and bad. Jaguar's underlying theme was supposedly copy nothing. But if you look at this, it looks very much like something out of the 1930s Art Deco movement. And if you look, I mean, it reminded me, when I saw that profile shot, of the Rolls-Royce Spectre EV that I drove last May. So in other words, I know they're saying copy nothing, but it looks very much like a copy of a Rolls-Royce Spectre EV, which is a $500,000 car. Now, they're saying theirs is going to come in at 200 and something thousand. So if you're going to copy something, copy the $500,000 car and sell it for, basically 40% of it, 40% of the price. Okay, maybe that works, and maybe they attract a few buyers. The other thing is that the Jaguar is supposed to be an EV, a pure EV. Well, Jaguar doesn't really have much of any expertise in developing an EV. Jaguar has had the I-Pace, which is an all EV crossover that they've been selling for several years. It hasn't exactly set the market on fire, which, as long as you're not setting the market on fire the way Teslas tend to, that might be a good thing. But it's not exactly a recipe for sales success, and certainly not a recipe for saving or salvaging an historic brand. So I wish them luck. I have seen circulating on the interwebs a version of this, which is again strictly a concept vehicle, which is kind of a medium to dark green matte finish metallic. And that one appears to have 4 doors, but again, it's still an illustration. It's not an actual product. And I can tell you from personal experience, the transformation from a vehicle from auto show concept to production reality, there's a lot of great looking concepts that never ever made the transition to the real world, or did so successfully. The best case in point would be the original Pontiac Aztec, which as a concept was actually kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And then GM had to productionize it. And when you do that, you have to make various compromises. And even Bob Lutz, who was there at GM at the time, said, unfortunately, the compromises we had to make absolutely killed it. Not the least of which was, instead of giving it its own dedicated platform where they could keep the proportions right, they wound up shoehorning it onto a minivan platform, which made the proportions wrong and awkward. Again, until we see the actual product in the sheet metal where you can touch it and see it and everything else, you don't know if it's going to make a successful transition to production. I'm not hopeful.
Like you, I wish them well. I would love to see the Jaguar brand continue and become revitalized. The other headwind that they very well might run into if they keep it as a pure EV is the trend that we're seeing in EV manufacturing vehicles right now, where the public has kind of lost, well, the industry has lost momentum. And the public has kind of stepped back and said, you know, we love the technology, but it's not going to work for me for various reasons. And we've talked about those in the past, with whether it's charging, range, expense, so forth, or cost of the vehicle. Then to put this out, and I know they're not rolling it out for another couple of years, most likely, at the very least, but maybe by then they've come up with something that works for people. But at the price point that you were talking about, I just don't see it accomplishing what they wanted to, unless they're just trying to do a little shock and awe and get a lot of attention, and then maybe they put out something that's a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid or something along those lines that's going to let people have something that they can live with in a practical way, feel like they're driving a cool car, still connected to the legacy, but just something that the market's going to accept and rush out and buy.
Well, that's a good point, Rob. If you recall, Jaguar is part of Jaguar Land Rover, and both of those are owned by the Tata Group out of India. Now, Land Rover has a couple of hybrid EVs. They don't really have a pure battery electric EV. And I think you might be hitting on something if the platform of the new Jaguar is flexible enough to accommodate. If we look at our friends at Stellantis, we've done a piece on them before. Stellantis also has a new platform, which I saw at the LA Auto Show, and it's kind of impressive. It's very big, but that they're underpinning the new Dodge Charger Daytona, which is their EV, but they're also going to have the Charger 6-pack, which is going to have, you guessed it, a 6-cylinder inline twin turbo engine. The powers that be at Stellantis have tried to pull that vehicle forward so they can get it to market. They have hybrids that they have in the wings, and they've pushed back the intro of the battery electric Ram Rev, which was their full electric pickup truck. So they've put that one on the back burner. They've pulled the gas powered stuff ahead, and I think they were going to do that even before the last election, where the country actually elected somebody who is overtly hostile, or has been, to EVs and especially EV mandates, except that his senior advisor is Elon Musk, who's the head of Tesla. So it's, as they say, politics makes some very, very strange bedfellows.
Right.
So, not to get too political.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, and hopefully they bring something to market, and they bring something that is going to wow the car buying public, and especially at the price point they are, we'll see new Jags on the road again, especially a Jag quasi sports car, which would be kind of nice.
It would be nice.
Yep. All right. Well, this is going to do it for the quick update on Jaguar's reveal, and we hope to see you again real soon. Thank you.